Okay, hi, good morning everybody in the UK. I'm here in Singapore at the moment, which is very nice, warm, and it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So appreciate everybody in the UK joining us early. Just trying to work the times, I think. So we felt we'll do 5 o'clock here and do it at 9 o'clock in the UK. So also we have a fantastic topic to discuss, and as usual, some great people and great guests who are going to chat it through with us. So today we're going to talk about water companies in the digital age. And it'd be really good to try and see how far we can get through, without actually falling into some of the traps that people have talking about things like, well, I don't know, different sort of three-letter abbreviations and what have you. Let's see how far, let's see how we do with the lack of TLAs. I think overall we live in a world of data and technology, and we use it continuously in our day-to-day living. And I think we're all very used to it, whether it be weather apps on our phones, engine management systems in our cars, or gaming technologies in the homes. We're surrounded by it. So essentially, when we then come to work, we all have nice computers and what have you, but how prevalent is digitization and the use of digitalization and the efficient use of it? How prevalent is it within the water sector? And then I think the next question that falls on from that is, how necessary is it? So there's a temptation to go for the new gadget, the latest tech, the latest gadget, and what have you. And do we need it to drive the efficiencies? And what we want to achieve to deliver the solutions that the water stress, basically, that we have, the water stress situation we have around the world, that society needs. So overall, what we want to try to explore is some of those questions. Then the other one, of course, is if and when we adopt the digital, or we go fully digital, and I'm thinking here particularly about the water networks, we do open the door, of course, to systems being hacked, how secure they are. I think if any of you have seen the recently published World Economic Forum table of risks, it's really interesting that the ones that were present in the next 2 years, the risks of the next 2 years, AI general misinformation and disinformation was down as risk number 2. And I think the other one was the risk number 5 was the cyber attacks. So both of those were really prevalent. And then if you look at the 10 years one, misinformation, disinformation, adverse outcomes of AI technologies, and cyber insecurity, they're the most severe risks on the 10-year horizon. So people are really worried about not just the use of data, it's how the misuse of data is. Interestingly, just as an aside, the most severe risk that the World Economic Forum says in the short and medium terms was extreme weather. So I think we live with that at the moment. So first of all, though, before I get into any of the details, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. I think, as you say, during the webinar, your microphones are muted, but you can get involved. So post questions on the chat, and we'll have plenty of time for discussion. We have the usual format here. So we have three presentations followed by questions. We try to get through as many. Don't be shy. If they're silly questions, or you think they're silly, ask them anyway. I promise I won't sort of say any of them, point name and shame anybody. But if you're thinking it, somebody else might be thinking it as well. So please just ask, and we'll try and answer it. We are, of course, also on all the social media platforms with #TheBlueThread. So use it and try and get the message out so we can try and build this community. This is the fourth webinar, and we're really excited about the way that it's going. So for any of you for the first time, so if we can move on the slide, please. So for any of you here for the first time, or who hasn't been here for a while, a very warm welcome to you. And wherever you are around the world, we do get a global audience here. So whatever you do, whatever time it is, very warm welcome to you. So I am Mark Smith. I'm the Water Sector Director for RSK. Just a little bit about me. I've been a water professional for more than 30 years. And basically after this time, I think I remain more curious about how we interact with water as a society. And that's developing all the time. Interestingly, here in Singapore, I think people have a much closer relationship with water, in that they think about it a lot more, they're aware of it a lot more, and they understand the real need to preserve water on both the supply side and on the demand side, and then of course obviously to secure the supplies through desalination or reservoirs or whatever. So I also believe that globally, and this is quite important, I think, most people will experience climate change through their interactions with water. And I really think that one of the big faults of the water sector has been we just don't get that message out. We tend to sit back in that carbon rule when actually most people don't understand carbon, but they do understand water. So water is important politically, financially, and socially. And I think, interestingly, in 2023, not just with COP, I think not with COP28 in Dubai, in 2023, generally, water became important to politicians all around the world. Finally, the UK woke up. And I think we are catching up in the UK with the rest of the world because it is critically important. Whether you are here in Singapore, where people are now talking about coastal flooding as an effect of global warming, that's a real conversation. Flooding in Europe, Pakistan, drought in Canada, water stress in Africa, floods in England. You know, water is really the new carbon, and we cannot live without it. So the world is waking up to that fact. And I think ultimately, what we want to talk about is water companies in the digital age. That's the chosen topic of the day. And it's a complicated one. And I think that the real complication for people is actually what is the role that digital solutions have. We have many problems to solve, obviously. And wherever we look for those solutions, data, technology, use of data, AI, they're all top of the list. And in the UK, I think we're trying to get more out of our asset base. We need to understand the assets better. I think Chris is going to talk about this in a minute. So we need to understand them if we're going to sweat them a bit more. Other parts of the world, different challenges, new shiny kit. You know, from desalination plants, as I mentioned, to transfer pipelines. What they all have in common is they are digital. They all have digital solutions. In fact, everything needs to have a digital twin these days. But do we need it? That's just something to keep in the back of your mind. And I think something that we're going to try. Is it just a fad? Probably not. Is it necessary? Should we pay for it? All these types of things are what we're going to do. So first up is Chris Steele. I've known Chris for many years, and Chris is the Director of Asset Management for Binnies in the UK. He brings about 20 years of asset management experience across the regulated and non-regulated water, energy and waste sectors. And I think he is also focused really on expediting the use of digital solutions and technologies to enhance the physical asset life cycle. Sweat the assets is another way of saying it. And aligning all this, of course, to the Sustainability Development Goals. So Chris's experience, combined with his passion really for nurturing new ideas, has brought him to lead a diverse team of asset management professionals to meet the evolving challenges of asset-intensive organizations. So Chris, really interested in what you're going to say. So I'll be quiet and I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Mark, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here today. So as Mark mentioned, I'm going to focus on the UK or broader European water industry. And I'm going to touch on the drivers and needs, approach and challenges, and outcomes and benefits. So when we look at drivers and needs first, they sort of fall into three main areas. So first is around stakeholder management, which touches on the increased demands, and rightly so, and we could talk about that a little bit, around regulatory compliance and the need for the water utilities to demonstrate compliance with that. So no longer is it sort of self-governance and self-management. You've got to be able to demonstrate to the regulators and to stakeholders more generally your compliance with water treatment consents, demand, and so on, which links very close as one of those key stakeholders, and perhaps the most important is customers. And so from that, we want to talk about the transparency of the customer. Again, as Mark mentioned, a bit more stark in Singapore, but customers here in the UK and Europe are becoming increasingly expectant of what the water company's doing, and be able to have ease and visibility of what that is when there's going to be issues with outages or whatever it might be. They want to see that their supply and what they're paying for ultimately is available when they need it at the quality they want it. And then following on from that, there needs to be certainty. This is probably touching more on the investment side of things of a stakeholder in terms of the intelligence of are we placing our money in the right place? Is it managing a cost, risk, benefit, or effectively, and are we getting value for money? So there's always the constraint around that. And the last one there around harnessing knowledge. So there's been many conversations about the drains in the water industry of knowledge, people leaving the business and quicker than they're coming into it. And so how do we get hold of that? Moving to the cost or more for less effectively is when we get into the increasing challenges around low build, no build linked to your European sustainability goals. So we need to demonstrate that we don't always just pour concrete, and to do that, we've got to come up with new and innovative ways to do that, of which digital plays an increasing role. The cost risk performance I mentioned, there's always an affordability line. We can't do everything, so how do we maximize that? And that links into then a broader life cycle of cost management. So not just capital investment, but looking how do we optimize across capital investment and operational expenditure. And sitting under that always sits as the aging asset base. As I mentioned, it's single-digit percentage numbers that we refurbish and replace of a complete asset base. So therefore, how do we better use that asset, optimize it, sweat it, as Mark mentioned, and really ensure that we still deliver the level of service that we need. And that moves us to more manage on risk. So we can't just build or put in infinite amounts of redundancy in the assets. So digital technologies help us to get closer to managing a leaner asset base through more automated and integrated systems. Approach and challenges, I put these into two buckets really: enterprise transformation and proof of concept. I've seen both completed, and really enterprise transformation is we're very top down senior leadership vision, and you're trying to change basically the whole company to achieve an outcome. Very slow, requires you to sort of hold your nerve, and you need a lot of buy-in across the different levels of hierarchy. The proof of concept, and the little person panic in there is you can end up with proof of concepts, which are great things, but often they stay just as that, proof of concept. There's a real struggle to get them beyond that. They're forever in sort of POC land. And really the result or the optimal way forward is a balance of both, where you get senior leadership buy-in, but you can test and show benefits through proof of concept early. And then moving to the outcomes and benefits, they're really the sort of opposing of the drivers and needs, really. We're using digital solutions that are deployable across more of the assets and systems, allows you to make more data-driven interventions. No longer do we need to subjectivity and who shouts loudest and so on. We can actually have a unified view of risk across the organization to make decision support easier. And that in turn gives more reliability on the service provision, but it also gives more reliability and certainty on where investment is needed, so it increases all those areas. Inversely then, it's reducing reactive failures, which is ultimately securing the level of service. And then we want to deliver that more reliable service at a full life cycle cost reduction. So that's back to that tooltext piece I was talking about. And the last piece around is we start to increase automation. We talk about prediction of what will happen with systems and different conditions and so on. Then that manual dependence that we now have becomes baked into digital solutions from there. And so if we move forward to a journey from that point, then typically where do you get started? And I did want to be able to give something to those people who've kindly joined us today to take away. So if you can scan that, although not now, please do it later. There's a nice journey we've done with Aarhus Van in Denmark about a digital journey, basically a digital roadmap, which you can see starts at the bottom there with on the right hand side with that organizational intent, moving through to standards and governance in place to give more certainty about how you go about your digital roadmap or digital journey to get benefit, moving to the architecture. Data quality we could spend hours on, but it is very important. The key bit with that is knowing which data is critical, worth collecting, completeness, accuracy, reliability and timeliness of the data points that you need to drive decisions. And then it's your roadmap and ultimately your investment in that roadmap. So key points there, very quick I know, but you can scan that code, as I say, and go through the full journey we went through with Aarhus Van, including that digital readiness level, which I would highly advise you undertake in order to get that baseline before you move forward in your digital journey. And with that, I will hand on. Thank you.
Right, Chris, thanks very much. I mean, one of the issues, don't disappear yet, come back to me. One of the issues is language. You know, sometimes, you know, I've been in the industry for many years, so have you, right? And sometimes we can be talking about the same thing with using completely different language. Do you think that is because the old civil engineering language is defunct, or is it that the digital sort of approach to the civil assets needs to evolve so they're actually people, who are sort of ultimately physically fixing these? We need to develop a common language, or is it just really, there's two different worlds that need to sort of learn to talk to each other?
So I would say, from personal experience, actually, very much the latter. So it's easy to say that the digital aspects are the thing that's moving on. Mechanical, electrical, IC instrumentation, and so they're all moving on as well. It's just the digital technology is newer and generally tends to move on a bit faster, and actually probably draws out a nice piece, which is always a challenge with digitization, which is integration. So these digital tools are not an answer in themselves, they're nearly always an enabler. And so it requires interaction with mechanical, electrical, civil, and so on, to be able to yield the value that or the benefit that we want to attain. So it's about new disciplines, different disciplines coming together with existing ones, and they both have to coexist in an integrated way to allow you to get the benefit that we expect and want from digital solutions.
So if you sort of take that then and you say we need, digital solutions are really important, what role do you see digitalization or the sort of AI solutions playing in the current challenges, particularly in the UK, the ones they face with CSO management? Because we cannot build tanks big enough to capture all this water. We have assets that exist, and the idea, maybe it's been oversold, that somehow we can sort of intelligentize the entire system so we can manage it perfectly well. What role do you see in there, Chris? How do you see that rolling out?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and I'm glad you addressed the elephant in the room, which is, CSOs, digital solutions can't undo that. That was a decision made many years ago, and you're right, digital solutions don't or can't replace the building increased capacity. What it can do, though, and I see it very in two main areas really. One is, so we're seeing the use of back to that integration piece actually, where we're bringing together disparate data sources, or what's traditionally been disparate data sources in terms of hydrology, consent requirements, and ventilation monitors for spills, weather forecasting, and we bring it together and we get to do two things. One is we get to understand which CSOs are most critical in terms of their impact if there's failures at those areas, or spills at those areas, and that allows water companies to prioritize. So back to that affordability line I mentioned, we can't do everything straight away, so we've got to prioritize. So there's a piece in there for digital solutions that allow you to do that, and then the second bit is, well, you've got to manage that over time, as I mentioned. And so where we see, for example, AI, and specifically I mean in that machine learning capabilities, where we're able to forecast or predict where we think CSO spills are likely to occur. So what we're really doing is using AI to buy time for operations field teams to intervene before the spill occurs. So you're both limited in the spill in the first place, or if you don't limit it, the spill or mitigate it happening initially, then you can at least reduce the duration that it occurs. So those are the sort of two areas I think in the UK that we're starting to see, and we get involved in and within BINIs around that. CSO prioritization, spill mitigation and reduction is probably the way I would put it, is where would you start to use digital solutions.
Excellent. All right, thanks, Chris. There's 100 questions I can ask you, but thank you very much for the moment. We'll come back. So next I want to introduce Ruth Clark. Ruth is the brand new head of digital for Xylem Water Solutions for UK and Ireland. So first of all, congratulations, Ruth, on the promotion in December, I think it was. So Ruth's a civil engineer with over 25 years experience of working with digital solutions within the water industry. She started her career as a consulting engineer undertaking river and coastal modelling studies, We could still do with a few more of them, actually, Ruth, at the moment. But she's since been involved in many, since then, many projects, from the delivery of flood and wastewater spill forecasting platforms through to smart water software, and as software as a service solution. So as I said, she recently rejoined Xylem and is the brand new head of digital. So she's going to drill down a little bit into it, and I'll give you the floor, Ruth. So over to you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mark. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Okay, I'll get started. Given my role within Xylem is that of delivering digital solutions, it'll probably come as no surprise that I do have keen interest in both digitisation and digitalisation. So digitisation to me is basically the means of capturing that data for storage and processing by a computer. And I think in the most part, we're quite far along that journey within utilities. There are still pockets of where that data is being captured on Excel spreadsheets, or which is digital, or pens and papers. But I think as the younger people come through, we talk a lot about the loss of knowledgeable people in the utility sector. But I also think that there is an opportunity with younger people who are basically brought up in the digital age, joining these organisations, making that less of a challenge to change over. So rather than talking about digitisation, what I'm going to talk about today is really the challenges about digitalisation. So that's the processes that sit around that data to get more out of it, to improve outcomes. So the following musings are obviously not exhaustive, and to be honest, it's a never-changing list that I'm going to go through, but hopefully it will be of interest to the audience today. So could we move forward a slide, please? Perfect. Thank you. So the only thing I can state with absolute certainty is that no two projects will ever be the same, and there's always going to be some change required within that journey for when you're implementing any new digital solution. And I should state that what I talk about here is generally smart platforms. So by that I mean where we're bringing lots of data together in it with a near real-time element to provide additional insights that can be used in operational capacity in the main. So generally, there'll be lots of different types of data in lots of different types of formats. So for example, in a water distribution network, you might want to bring in acoustic data, high-res pressure data, chlorine data, flow data, turbidity, as well as some alerts that might be generated by the sensors picking up this data, and combining all that with GIS, CMMS data, etc., etc. So some digital platforms will have a much more limited set of data. So if you're looking at condition-based monitoring for pumps, for example, that might be a much easier implementation, which won't necessarily have the challenges I'm going to talk about today. So most water companies, as we all know, have lots and lots of data in a digital format, but it's how we use that data really to get that value out of it. And the points I'm going to talk about now are quite intertwined actually, so there will be some overlap between all of them. So the first point I'm going to talk about, and I think Chris sort of mentioned it slightly before, is having clear company-wide digital strategy. And this makes it sound like I'm denigrating water utilities for not having a clear company-wide digital strategy, and that's absolutely not the case. But this one's more about missed opportunity and introducing efficiencies by looking at the bigger picture when looking to start any smart project. I think a historic challenge in the UK is the 5-year funding cycle approach and the short-termism that has sort of introduced into the way we work. So other challenges with this is really in the UK particularly, but also around the world, is the sheer size and complexity of the water utilities. There's many different working parts, and it's very difficult to necessarily get all of those parts working together. The reason why this is, I guess, a contender in my hit parade of challenges is that when projects, which quite often start off of proof of concepts or pilots, are carried out on an ad hoc basis, there's quite a lot of reinventing the wheel, especially around the organisation of data. So having a clear company-wide digital strategy can really facilitate that and make sure that you're not constantly going through the same steps at the beginning of any project. And this challenge also, I guess, ties into the current digital maturity topic that's also on this list. The next one is clear project definition, and this is not just about understanding the scope of the project and not letting it creep, which is always a bit of a problem, because that is certainly also a challenge, as people working on projects can suddenly see other problems that could be solved using the platform, and then can veer off down various rabbit holes that weren't part of the main scope. But it's more about ensuring that all the people who are involved or need to be involved in the project, so that could be the IT department, data owners, asset management, GIS, they understand at the outset what's going to be required and what success looks like. So they're all working towards the same goal. So having a well laid out project scope with milestones and responsibilities is key to keeping the project on track and enables a clear understanding of whether the project has been successful. So knowing what success looks like is a really key part of this. And that's not to say that things can't change. Inevitably things will change, but it's about avoiding change for the sake of change and keeping on the track of what you're actually trying to achieve. So it might seem like an obvious thing, but it can be very challenging, particularly with proof of concepts and when the technology is new. The next one is current digital maturity. So do you have the right data in the right format? Is it easily available for the project for the right period of time? So length of record, at the right spatial density, if it's sensor data, for example, within an acceptable latency and at the acceptable accuracy. So what would be required to reach that level in both cost and time? These are really important things to think about before you start on one of these projects. Are there clear data owners who can facilitate? Does the IT policy enable easy access to that data? Can anyone connect to the data historian? Are the cybersecurity requirements, have they been met? So all of this needs to be understood before you can embark on any project to ensure its success. The next one is stakeholder buy-in. If data owners, IT, hydraulic modelling teams or other departments are required to keep the deployment of a project on track, are they bought into it, and do they support the vision, and will they be able to then prioritise the requirements needed? So for example, if a data owner has a whole set of other priorities that they can't provide the data to the team involved in the project for 6 months, that's going to cause an issue to the timelines that they will slip, and it may mean that the project fails. I think another thing that's really important, and this is quite commonly overlooked, is the buy-in from the platform end users. So I think most people, when you're working under pressure, it's very easy to slip back to old ways of working, especially when you're under a lot of pressure. So understanding the real key challenges that the end users of any platform have is really important for its successful adoption. So that's working out what they're doing now, what their bugbears are, what would they see as being an improvement, rather than forcing something that doesn't work for them upon them. And finally on my list is flexibility of a solution. A really common challenge when you're providing platforms that the end user needs to be able to adapt and evolve them themselves. If I'm not advocating that all aspects of any platform are open to be tinkered with, but being able to make changes, add sensors, means that they don't have to rely on the supplier to every time they need a change or want to make some differences to the way that data is served up to them or is being interrogated. It means that it's not going to be delayed. They can do it as soon as they need to make those changes. So that is really, I'm going to wrap up there. Thanks for listening to me. As I said, these things will change. So I'm quite sure if I came back in a month's time, I'd have a different list. I'm sure there'd be some common threads, but I'm sure there'd be some changes as I get involved in the next project, for example. So thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Ruth. I mean, there's a lot there. There's an awful lot there, and it would be easy to sort of pick it apart. But just a question: you spoke about challenges to the adoption or implementation of smart platforms using some high-level themes. If you had to pick one area which you think would have the biggest impact on the move to a more digital approach, what would it be? Just pick one of them.
I think, and it's probably it sounds simple, but it's probably one of the most challenging, is I think having that more holistic view of where a company wants to move digitally over a longer period is probably the most important thing to me. So the reason being that one of the barriers to adoption of new digital solutions is cost. So somebody might want to try a new digital solution, but it's going to cost this much to do a proof of concept or what have you. And it's not actually just the adoption of the platform, but the trialing of that solution. So if you can remove the need to go through a lot of the similar things, the data organization right at the beginning of a project, I think that people will be able to move more agilely, more quickly, at less cost, because they're cutting out a whole load of work that gets repeated, I'm quite sure, on lots and lots of different platforms. So for me, that would probably be one of them. Also understanding the sort of longer term goals. So it might be that the first thing that people want to look at is reducing leakage, for example. The second thing might be looking at blockage detection, or reducing CSOs, as Chris spoke about earlier. I think these things, being able to have a clear journey and use the same data, maybe the same platform, that kind of thing, I think can really facilitate the adoption of digital solutions.
And just to build on that, you mentioned it and Chris mentioned it, and I think proof of concepts, there's an awful lot of, it's a cul-de-sac for a lot of stuff, isn't it? You know, it goes into a POC, people look at it, seems interesting, and it sort of stops. And I've heard all sorts of, reasons, somebody lost interest, somebody moved jobs, whatever, it doesn't matter. But it seems to me that uniquely, trying to move from an analog to a digital solution, or an old-fashioned to a new solution, just seems to be very uncomfortable for the water sector. And is that, do you find that, I mean, we have a terrible example in the post office where, there's a solution forced on people, obviously, with some terrible consequences, right? Whatever about the bits that happened afterwards, it was obvious that this solution was put on people's workstation and they had to deal with it. Is there something the water sector is just particularly bad at, or is it just that we sort of are aware of it more because that's the sector we work in? Why is so much stuff never get outside the POC?
Yeah, it is a real challenge. Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to have a definitive answer. I'm not going to solve everyone's problems here and now. I think there's lots and lots of reasons why. I think one of the things is I think that having that whole stakeholder buy-in and making sure that you stick to the timelines. I think when things start to drag because you can't get data and it hasn't been scoped out properly, that Bob's not going to be able to provide me with the data that's actually core and fundamental to the solution, and he's going to take him 6 months to provide that. I'm not denigrating any Bobs here either, by the way. That can start to make drift happen, and I think when drift happens, people can start to think, oh, it's not all that, people move on to other things, other problems, they get different priorities, and I think that's one thing. I think there's also that whole adoption by the end user. I think it's something that's quite often overlooked, I think. But if you are a leakage analyst, for example, and you are charged with, you've got this current daily workflow, and then you're given this platform that you've had no feed into how it works, whether it works for you, does it give you the information that you need, in an efficient way, or do you still have to trawl through lots of information? I think making sure that the people are actually using it, want to use it and see the value in it, and it works for them is really important in terms of adoption. I could probably go on for hours actually on this topic.
Probably,
so I'll stop.
I just wonder, you just a very quick follow-up to that. You don't think we're particularly bad at it as engineers? You just think it's probably it's just society in general struggles with change, and digital change is really, really, really hard to do at times.
I definitely agree. There's some of that. I think some people really love it, and I think some people are very resistant to it. But I think if you're in a high pressure job, like in an ops room, control room, it is very difficult to move from something that you're very familiar with when you've got 1,000 alarms going off. I personally think that was just human nature. You're resistant to change in that high pressure environment.
Okay. All right, Ruth, I'll leave you alone. Thanks very much. Okay. So next up is Tom. So Tom Allen, and he's the head of digital water at the RSK Centre of Sustainability Excellence based here in Singapore. And Tom's, in a past life, he worked for Thames Water as well as a few others, but he's over 8 years experience of professional experience as a basically key role in pioneering, I think, metering programs for water utilities, expertise in the entire smart metering life cycle. His current responsibility includes strategic decision making, implementing digital water software technology, and utilizing data analytics to optimize sort of decision making across the whole sector. So Tom, without any further ado, you're going to talk a little bit about what your situation here in Singapore, but also I think some of your other experiences along the line of the smart metering program. So over to you.
Thank you, Mark, and hi everyone. Thank you for joining and listening to us all today. Hopefully I'll keep this on time, so we have plenty of time for the questions at the end. But yeah, as Mark mentioned, I've nearly 10 years experience in managing digital projects in the water industry, starting at Thames Water and then moving out to Singapore, working with PUB and working for Jacobs. So yeah, it's been a great journey to arrive here in RSK and head up the digital water team within the Centre for Sustainability Excellence. So we take quite a holistic approach to sustainable solutions, and water is a really key part of that. I'm constantly banging that drum that water is a part of climate change. It's not just about carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. So that's really what attracted me to join this team and set up our digital water offering. So in terms of how we deliver our services that can be quite well established in the UK and in Europe, how do we offer them out here in the region? We focus on 4 key services, and these aren't isolated services. They work in tandem together. So if we look at a particular technology, it can relate to one of these 4 or all 4 of them, and we can deploy all of them together. So with strategy and training, this is really the what, why, and how you're going to implement digital technologies, and also look at what benefits you're going to receive from it. And that's a really important step. Rather than just rush out and install the latest technology, there does need to be some thought and planning and benefits realization behind it before it gets implemented into the real world. And so much of the technology we look at and the digital solutions we provide will result and generate in data that we can then analyze. So that's our second service, is we look at the data to action. Water utilities, as mentioned by our previous guests, have vast amounts of data already, and introducing new technology is only going to increase that further. So our service really focuses on how do we make sure the quality of that data is correct. How do we manage it? How do we provide data security and data privacy policies to that data? And then ultimately, how do we analyze it and get value and action from it? Some of that action and insights is provided by our water software. So that's part of our third service, and that's water software dedicated to the water industry. That can be a range of software, but for example, digital twin. Finally, is our technology service. And whilst we don't provide technology directly ourselves, we work with a wide range of technology manufacturers and innovators and startups to provide the right solution for the problem that we're trying to solve at the utility. So that could be a sensor that tracks a particular metric, or it could be a piece of automated equipment on a plant or production site. So to kind of bring some of these 4 services to life, I just want to talk a bit about smart metering as well. So if we look at smart metering, and we're seeing huge investments in smart meters globally. I'm sure Ruth will appreciate that I've chosen a picture of a census meter, but I should be clear that other smart meters are available as well. So when we're installing these meters, we really do see some key benefits come out of that, from leakage detection, demand management, so really driving the water efficiency. And I'm a firm believer that there's no supply solution that can handle unmeasured demand. So we really need to help customers save water, and that can be a combination of incentives and data sharing. And really, it's about allowing the utilities to manage their infrastructure and water supplies better. I mean, it would be very unusual for even a small supermarket to not be tracking how much of their product they're selling on an hour-by-hour basis. So for huge water utilities not to know where their water is going on an hour-to-hour basis is something we're really trying to highlight and promote within the industry. So I think we've seen some very large tenders go out into the industry in the UK to install kind of next round of AMP8 smart metering. But what we're looking at is like, how do we apply this in the region? Because some of those benefits that we see in the UK don't necessarily translate into the Asia region. So we've just gone to the next slide. So in the Southeast Asia region, when we're looking at deploying a technology like smart metering, we have to overcome some challenges. So often there can be numerous small suppliers operating at kind of thousands of property level, which naturally leads to there's less funding for a huge investment of AMI and smart metering. The third challenge is really around the lower resource costs. So some strong business cases around smart metering are, you don't have to manually read meters, you don't have to send teams out physically. You can do this all remotely now. But actually, where labor rates can be very much less than compared with Europe or America, that business case doesn't stack up. So we need to find the right business case for this technology. It can't just be about price, because they'll look at the upfront investment for a smart meter, and it doesn't necessarily equate to a financial return when it comes to reading manual meters. And finally, there's challenging environments as well. So there's a huge range of varying conditions in this region, from the heat, weather, such as rain coming in, and the locations of the meters can often be in quite challenging locations to perform installations, and that drives up the installation cost as well. So we try and overcome this by spreading out the cost of these types of technologies, offering upfront infrastructure as a service. So we'll provide a monthly fee over time, and that can smooth out some of that challenge of less funding that's available up front. And we work really to make sure that there's a less inequality and disparity between, say, the regions in the UK and Asia. So I mean, the IMF, for example, recently said about how AI and advanced analytics will really benefit high income nations more than low income nations, and that's something that we're really kind of acutely aware of when we're applying this technology in the region. So we need to make sure that it's beneficial to all, both the customers and the suppliers themselves. So I'll wrap that up there and open it up to the questions from Mark and others.
Hey, thanks very much, Tom. Just sort of thinking about this, I did mention in my introduction, digital twins. You can't move in the water sector without bumping into a digital twin somewhere, right? Do you see wide adoption of digital twins in the water sector industry? All new stuff is digital twins, but a lot of the older assets, a lot of the older solutions don't. So do you see that being a body of work that has to be done? And do you see it being affordable to do it as well? To be honest?
Yeah, I think it's really important for the industry to define what a digital twin is, right? I mean, take an Excel sheet full of information about an asset. I mean, it's a digital copy of something physical. Is that a digital twin? And that's not something that we in this space would class as a true digital twin. But we're seeing a lot of modeling software and copies of data be badged as something that hits that, almost like branding of a digital twin, that buzzword, so it ticks that box. And I think for me personally, I see digital twin as a unified digital twin that covers an end-to-end process from every factor and data input that can be collected along that journey. So in the industry, I think we're seeing some confusion of what people actually want, and we're seeing some tenders come out that no longer define a request for a digital twin, because what they're after for is improved efficiency, lower operating costs, and they want a solution that's able to do that rather than just badge it as we want a digital twin. So it's now shifting more to solving the problem rather than just introducing something that is the current buzzword in the industry.
Okay, and I think I mean, another thought that comes as we sit here in Singapore is I think a lot of people, particularly in Europe, think, you know, this part of the world is very tech savvy, very digital. How do you find it? Do you find it in, you know, I mean, having worked in the UK, having worked, you know, in that sort of rollout of some of the Thames Water programs, you know, how do you go about promoting adoption of digital solutions in Asia? Is it a different? Is it an easier sell? Do people sort of assume you're going to do it? You know, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it certainly depends on the individual country, and you know, we don't treat, you know, Southeast Asia as one market to target to, because you know, it's such a range from, you know, probably tech hubs such as Singapore and Hong Kong and Taiwan through to you know, more developing nations and the kind of the tiger cub economies that are growing rapidly. But there's a real opportunity for those countries to almost leapfrog. You know, if you're developing new water treatment works, laying new pipes, you can build them with digital from the ground up. Whereas, you know, take a utility like Thames Water with, you know, Victoria and Mains, where you're having to consider digital as an upgrade and a retrofit. So there's a huge opportunity within the region, even though there may not be the necessary upfront funding to do so. I mean, the example I always give is, if you think about the adoption of computers in Europe and UK, right? You know, we slowly got home computers and laptops, and then smartphones came along. Well, you know, developing nations went straight from you know, into the smartphone era, and the adoption of smartphones is widespread. So they're definitely tech savvy in how people adopt new technology, and we're hoping to replicate that for water as well.
Okay, all right, Tom, thank you very much. So I think that's the end of the sort of presentation. So maybe if I can ask Ruth and Chris to join us for a few questions, just to sort of wrap up. We have some time for questions. So I mean, I just one that I think is, I mean, there's quite a few here, but let's ask. Well, here's a good one. Which area has digitalization been the most successful in? Which area of the water sector, right? Okay. And any indicators as to why? So maybe Ruth, you could kick off with that one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having slight Wi-Fi problems, but I think I got that. So which area has been the most successful?
Yeah, which area have we sort of nailed a little bit of digitalization being the most successful, and then any indicators as to why that has been successful?
I think that's a really massive question, actually, and I think there are so many different digital solutions out there, from generative AI for plant design, you know, and I won't be involved in all of them, so I can only really talk from my experience. I think whether they're most successful because you know, of something that's been done specifically, or whether they're just the most pressing problems that people are trying to solve. But I think things like leakage detection, you know, in the UK, things are obviously driven very much by the AMP cycle and what's highlighted as what things need to be addressed. So I think historically we've been involved certainly in successful leakage detection projects, where you can push down the amount of leakage detect bursts and slower growing leaks, that kind of stuff, with all of this information. I suspect in the next AMP cycle that's going to probably be replaced with the CSO reduction things that people are now having to look at to reduce pollution, etc., etc. So I think from my perspective, we very much concentrate on things like metadata analytics and leak detection and you know, blockage detection, that kind of stuff. So from my perspective, they're the areas in which I work. But I think, yeah, digitalization spans every aspect, I think, of the water industry.
Okay, thank you. Chris, any thoughts? Big success.
Yeah.
Big success.
Yeah, so touching on successes and building on Ruth's point. So I think and Tom's actually. So smart metering is an area that has been successful. It's been around for some time. Why is it the case? Well, it's something that is very rinse and repeat. So there are the challenges that Tom pointed out, but you're doing the same thing over and over again, which allows built-in efficiency and takes out uncertainty and all of the rest. So that's definitely something that has been successful and is proven to be, obviously. And then the second area, certainly that we're seeing, and I suppose linked to more Ruth's area, is around digitization or insight around condition and performance of rotational equipment. So what we're seeing is that's becoming a lot cheaper to do. So the ability to deploy industrial IoT has come down, integration, gateways, it's all becoming more package plant, you know, in terms of it's all integrated within it, and you're not having to do it yourself. With that comes platforms normally, so they're sort of starting to put them all behind paywalls. But yeah, success there where a lot of the integration and issues around data quality and so on have been solved by the supply chain. And what they're doing is deploying solutions that take care of that on the client's behalf. You start to become, you know, move to intelligent clients and touching on digital twin, which is a massive debate. But this bit of holistic insight across, you know, rotational equipment, hydraulic information, treatment, you know, water quality, how you bring all that together, I think is where the real challenge is, because we've still got these pockets of technology solving specific things for that area. But water utilities operate a holistic bath to bay, you know, sink to, you know, source to tap solution, and or service, sorry, and therefore you need a solution that gives insight to that, which I think is where, I know you asked for successes and I just presented you with a challenge, but you can see some of the benefits within that, or successes in parts.
No, I think you know, it's always good to throw challenges in, but I think it's interesting that the successes are the ones that are the easier identified problems that were there to be solved, I think, you know, and I think sometimes, I think, Ruth, you came across it, that we get lost sometimes in the complexity of the problem, and then the solution becomes even more complex when you throw in the vast data sets that we have to manage. So yeah. I think, so a question here, Tom, I think you might have a good, how can we be more resilient against the misinformation or the potential of misinformation from AI? And I think that goes back to this whole World Economic Forum thing of information. I think they're all talking about the American election here, but let's see where, you know, in terms of water.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's always about bringing in the right people to be part of the solution. So, you know, the SCADA engineers in the control room, like they need to be in that process of design, in the process of implementation, in the process of operations, and you don't do a like for like replacement and then you assume everything that's been outputted by you know, an algorithm, or, you know, based on assumptions, based on historical data, is correct until it's really been validated by the people in the industry that know what they're doing. I think for me, it's about adoption of digital technology, and that's the metric to measure the success. Because if we start just assuming that, yeah, the new thing will be better than the old, then we're going to run into that kind of misinformation coming out from the new thing. So it needs to be a journey that you take people on. So I'd really put people at the heart of that process rather than just assume, yeah, it's going to be better and it's going to be replaced.
I think there's a whole sort of concern around the cybersecurity side of things as well that we perhaps didn't touch on. But I think just moving on to some of the other questions, here's a fairly easy one. Chris, you'll know this from Binny's. Do you face any challenges with the accuracy of technical drawings, whether it be their assets, plant, or roof records, and how are they managed? So do water companies have access to all of these drawings through digital platforms, or are they still on a journey of discovery about some of their assets?
So completely, there is absolutely a challenge to do this, and that so created by the supply chain, obviously a lot of checks and balances in terms of the check and reviewing and approving those drawings. They get handed over into the owner operator environment, and they disappear. and seldom used again. And then what happens, obviously, in fact, I'm probably spending too long on the cause. In terms of how to improve it, then a lot of it is very similar to the asset registration and deregistration process. So and typically in environments that aren't large scale capital delivery. So in-house delivered teams, directly managed capital, third or tier 2, 3 subcontractors, changing information on the fly, in a reactive environment. Even more so, and that all comes secondary. So you've got to create the ability to make changes to information on the fixed asset register and the drawings themselves, GAs, whatever it might be, to ensure their accuracy. What we have seen linking more to the sort of more digitization and the geospatial elements of it is technology. It becoming far easier to go and digitally scan an asset. We can scan a treatment works of a few 100,000 PE, a population equivalent in a few hours, and so the ability to do it is becoming easier. And the last point, and the ability to update parts of it are becoming easier. The last point I'll make is that the drawings, the need to create drawings are for different purposes. So you can go and scan a site and have a digital representation of a site, embed information within it, or link information within it, more importantly, around manuals, specifications, asset information, time series data, whatever that might be, but you don't use that for design purposes. Whereas you go into, you need other drawings that are suitable for design, so the accuracy is far higher. So understanding what you want to use the information for, very much back to Tom's point about putting the people first. What's the end user requirements, the problem you're trying to solve? Then you start to tailor what your drawings are used for and for what purpose, and therefore the effort and the process you put into updating them. So
I think, Chris, the question being, do you face any challenges with the accuracy of technical drawing? The answer is yes, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's. I always find it's quite amusing when you find that you have the drawings, and then you find the asset, and then you adjust the drawings because you don't know where the asset is. But I think it's really interesting that we now have some tools that can actually address some of those inaccuracies. But I think it's fair to say that within the GIS or whatever systems we have, at times they cannot be taken as gospel. I think that's fair.
No, and I've got an interesting metric actually for the audience. So we've been involved in a number of these, verify asset information in terms of completeness, and it's typically for the UK water sector at least between 25 to 28% of the entire asset base is not on any fixed register. So there's if you think about all those assets, all the risks that they pose, all the investment planning that goes on, and 25 to 27% of those assets are not known about.
Maybe we should set a challenge for the kids in schools to go find the local water pumping station that nobody knows about. So, really interesting question right at the end, and I think it's just something I think I'd like Tom to try and go this one as well from a different culture, so I think, and then we'll call it a day. But apologies if we haven't been able to get through the question because there's been plenty of them. What would you advise to an organization about to embark on digitalization, just at the start of the journey, and how fast, how extensive, and how would they then, I think the really interesting bit of this question, how would they monitor the success of the progress of that digitalization program?
Okay, well, I would say that they need to have an honest appraisal of where they are now. I think quite often there's a very different view across the business, and I think it comes back to making sure all the stakeholders who need to be involved are involved. So the people who own the data, understand the challenges of accessing that data. I think quite often they know they've got the data and assume that it's a very simple case of the data will be made available. So I think it's all about understanding at the very beginning, where you are now, where you want to be, and having that honest understanding of it. And I think in terms of measuring the success, as long as you keep and this is one of my bugbears, keep to that narrow scope of what success looks like. You can always expand it out later when you've proven what you originally set out to prove works, rather than it growing arms and legs and becoming some type of multi-tentacled monster. That
having that clear company-wide digital strategy you talked about in your presentation, I think
that would certainly help.
In there. So Tom, do you have anything to add to that, or would you sort of come at it a different way, or?
Yeah, I think agreed largely with what he says, and I think my experience is that when people drive like an overriding business strategy, it shouldn't translate into it has to be a big bang of digitalization, and everything has to go on the same day. So my view of it is that it's like building a jigsaw, and you have to have a view of what you're trying to end up with, but you shouldn't stop people from trying to put the pieces in place and over time add a new piece. So you need to really allow people to, if they've got a very contained, solid business case for digitalization, as long as it fits with that longer term vision, you shouldn't stop them from doing it, because if you do, they'll just go on off and do their own thing that won't be aligned to the strategy, because people really are hungry for this technology. So we need to be allowing the business to digitalize at the pace that they want, but just making sure it is aligned to that longer term strategy.
Okay. We've run out of time, but I want to just squeeze in one more question, and it's I think I know the answer to this. It's essentially about what effect this will have on employment and the number of utility staff. I would answer it myself, as in it's not a reduction metric. It would be a more of the job roles will change and adapt over time. We've lost Ruth, which I think she's had some Wi-Fi problems. But Chris, do you want to have just in literally 20 seconds? Would you agree with that, or do you think that there is an actual reduction in number?
So there's so I agree with you. It's a change, an evolution of roles. You'll always still need engineering roles. You'll always still need operational roles. But what they come is doing more higher value activities where they're verifying the outputs of more automated solutions. And there's obviously always a question around, well, who is taking overall accountability to provide your water or to treat it? And you need a human in there somewhere to oversee that. So it's a change in skill set. I think to Tom's point, it's a welcome one. People are hungry to try these things. There's a nervousness around change, but that's change in people and just normal behaviors. But yeah, it's an evolving skill set, a changing skill set that still holds the old or the traditional skills, not old, but brings in these new capabilities with it.
Okay, thanks, Chris. We've lost Ruth, so I'm going to say thanks on her behalf, and thanks to you, Tom, and thanks to Chris. I think it's been a really, really interesting session. I'd love to we need to probably redo it again and look at it from a few other angles. The questions have been, there's been an awful lot of questions, and I think what it is I think people are hungry for this, but they don't know where to go. So look, I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to go to have a nice beer in a nice warm bar now, Chris, and you can look out at the snow in Belfast. So thank you very much for your time, and goodbye from Singapore, and good luck to everybody, and have a nice day wherever you are. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Okay.